Welcome to this fourth in my series of 5 top 10 videos on Wyzant, where my tutor name is Daniel B., PhD. The platform generously allows each tutor to upload a maximum of 5 short spotlight videos. I was thinking about what I could say in the span of a few minutes about writing, one of my specialties, that might be the most helpful to anyone who watches. It seemed to me that top 10 tips for more effective writing, based on my decades of experience as a professional writer and coach, would be a good topic. So here's a summary, after which I'll say a few words about each of these tips. But first, let's articulate the key question that provides the context for everything that follows. Why is clarity of communication so important? Well, the quality of your communication reflects the quality of your thinking. So if you're not communicating clearly, you are not thinking clearly. And if you're not thinking clearly, you cannot achieve your full potential. You would not be doing justice to yourself. Moving now to the tips. Tip number 1, put yourself in your reader's shoes, because as a writer, your primary obligation is always to your reader. Your writing will be effective to the extent that your reader can understand and relate to it. Most people fail to put themselves in the place of their reader or audience. This is the main reason they fail to communicate their messages effectively, and the main reason they are unsuccessful. To meet the challenge of seeing things from your reader's perspective, consider this 3-part strategy for approaching any communication. What action do I want the reader to take? What are her key concerns and position? What will motivate the reader to take the desired action? Review what you've written from the reader's perspective, and your writing will become infinitely more powerful. Tip number 2, create a simple outline or framework before starting to write. In other words, plan. Organize your thoughts. Who do you think will present the more persuasive piece of writing? The person depicted on the left or the one on the right? The truth relating to outlines is that most people start writing before they are really ready to write. They work out their thoughts as they are writing, on the fly, so to speak. This leads to writing that is poorly structured, meandering, and repetitive. The end result is a failure to be persuasive. The solution is to first create a simple outline or framework before actually starting to write. In the long run, this will typically save you time. Tip number 3, tell a story. In other words, think of writing as storytelling. It's easier, more enjoyable for you, and more effective in terms of communicating the desired message or information to your readers. Writing at its best, all writing, including scientific writing, by the way, is storytelling. In part, that's because everyone likes to listen to stories, which also suggests a clear framework. The more your reader wants to read what you've written, the more successful your message is likely to be. A successful message is one that achieves the desired results. Why storytelling? If I told you that I have a memo, a report, or a lecture for you to review, how likely is it that you would be eager to read it? But if I said I have a story to tell you, chances are you would be genuinely interested in hearing it, wouldn't you? As a practical matter, what does this mean? It means you can approach your writing as storytelling. Describe the situation, relate the facts, use action words. Whenever you find yourself struggling with what to say, just tell the story. Tip number 4, keep it simple, because less is more. Strive for simplicity of expression. To help accomplish this, follow William Strunk's guideline: omit needless words. In general, the best writing is simple and direct. Writing that is simple and direct is most easily understood. It also tends to be the most forceful and memorable. Use no more words than necessary, and never use a complicated word if a simpler one will work just as well. As George Orwell famously advised, never use a $10 word when a $5 one will do. How can you achieve such a style? One technique is to use conversation as your guide. Imagine that you are explaining something over the phone or in person to someone you know, a parent, a friend, a significant other, someone who is not an expert in whatever it is that you are writing about. You only have a few seconds to get your point across. What would you say? Read it out loud to see whether it would work under those circumstances. If it seems to you that it would not, keep rewriting until it seems to you that it would. Tip number 5. For greater speed in writing, use placeholders. What happens when we mentally search for the word or phrase we want, but aren't able to pull it out of our mind? We stop writing. The flow is turned off. We lose time and momentum. Rather than stop, consider putting a placeholder in brackets at that point with something that describes in very basic terms what you want to eventually fill the space with. Chances are that when you make another pass through the document, those missing words or phrases will come to you much more quickly. For whichever ones do not, simply repeat the cycle. Most likely, you'll find that the speed of your writing increases dramatically as a result of this one simple technique. Tip number 6, rein in run-ons. In my experience, the single most common writing mistake is run-on sentences. To simplify for our purposes here today, the most common type of run-on sentence that I see is two complete ideas which deserve to stand alone that have been fused into a single sentence using the word "and" as a connector. Usually, the easiest solution is to simply break the sentence up into two separate sentences. Sometimes replacing "and" with a word or phrase showing the relationship between the two sentences is another possible option. Tip number 7, write with power. We've already talked about simple and direct. Break up long paragraphs simply means making shorter paragraphs out of very long ones to increase readability. The other 3 suggestions here are: favor the active over the passive voice. Remove there is, there are as sentence starters. And put the punchline, meaning the most important word or words in the sentence, last. Following these guidelines will add impact to your writing the moment you implement them. Tip number 8, leverage the magic of lists. Replacing long, dense paragraphs with lists can serve to simplify and clarify your writing. Why are lists effective? They are effective because they communicate information quickly, at a glance. Lists can be appropriate whenever 3 or more related pieces of information are presented in a similar format. Tip number 9, let it sit before proofreading. Skilled writers know that one secret to good writing is to let whatever it is you've written, including an email, sit for a while, coming back to review it with fresh eyes at a later time. That's not always possible, of course, but reviewing something like an email, even a few seconds after you first wrote it, can still have big benefits. To help with your proofreading and editing, 3 other best practices to consider are building time into your schedule for revising, editing, and proofreading. If possible, give yourself more time to do the writing, and leverage AI to check your drafts for errors. The more bots you run them through, the more errors you may be able to catch. And finally, speaking of AI, tip number 10, use AI for brainstorming and preliminary research only. Apart from proofreading, as just mentioned, ChatGPT and other AI bots such as Google Bard, now known as Gemini, are currently most useful for brainstorming and preliminary research. Anything they come up with must be checked thoroughly, as these bots do tend to hallucinate. In other words, make things up. But if used appropriately, they can be very helpful for these purposes. Also, keep in mind that their writing tends to sound quite wooden and hollow. It can be detected by programs such as GPT-0, the same way that Turnitin.com detects plagiarism. So if you want top-notch writing, don't delegate that to AI bots. By following the suggestions just given, your writing will improve immediately, with all the benefits that come from superior communication. If you'd like to further boost your writing performance or get help with a specific project by working with someone who has a proven track record and who, in the long run, will save you time and money, you may wish to avail yourself of a complimentary discovery consultation, during which time I learn enough about your situation to make an assessment as to whether my process may be a good fit for you. This, of course, would be reinforced by Wyzant's Good Fit Guarantee for an actual session, whereby your satisfaction for the first hour is guaranteed, or your money back, thereby making it a completely risk-free proposition for you. This is Daniel B., PhD, thanking you for your attention and wishing you the very best in all your endeavors.